Coraline is the story of 12-year-old Coraline Jones who has just moved into a new apartment with her parents. Bored and unhappy with the lack of attention she receives from her mom and dad, Coraline finds a mirrored life beyond the secret door where she has a other mother and a other father who live in the exact same house. Her other mother and father, unlike real parents, give her all the attention she wants. This world, controlled by the other mother, is open for Coraline to live in forever and ever. All she has to do is let her other mother sew buttons into her eyes. Coraline was written by Neil Gaiman and originally began as a novel. It was later turned into a graphic novel adapted and illustrated by P. Craig Russell. 1 year later, Coraline was modified for the screen as a stop-motion animated feature directed by Henry Selick. The graphic novel is very similar to the novel. The plot and characters remain the same and nothing really changes, save for a few details in the imagery written in the novel which can be drawn out in a graphic novel. The graphic novel and the film, however, are quite different. Characters have been added and scenes altered to fit this edition. Both the novel and the graphic novel are suggested for ages 8 and up, while the film is rated PG with the warning that it is not recommended for young children due to frightening scenes. They are both quite scary, however the graphic novel for Coraline is more frightening than the film. The film turns the other mother's world and characters into one of fantasy and magic, whereas the graphic novel leaves the images as simple and real. Nothing changes between Coraline's real world and the other world beyond the door. Along with the imagery, there is a transformation in the character of Coraline, her other mother, which the graphic novel portrays in a frightening way, and the film changes, therefore losing these elements of fear. In the graphic novel, the house that Coraline moves into is drawn and described in Gothic style. The very first page of the graphic novel is a splash page showing the house that is yet to belong to the Jones family. The architecture of the house is done in Gothic style with a tall, steep roof and many ornate windows. The dark shadows on the left side of the house give it a bold appearance that stands out from the pale and unshaded foreground. Black cat and the for sale sign could be symbols of danger and bad luck to do with the house. The graphic novel gives a panel-to-panel description of the house. It is a large old house with a dark and scary underground cellar. Beside the house is a garden, which adds to the mystery of setting, as overgrown and untended space, like the house, is unknown territory. In the last panel, we see a shadowed figure with its hand on the curtain as if it were spying on the new neighbors. The text beside the image is, "There were other people who lived in the house." This line with the image of the happy family above looks like it could come from a horror film, one where the crazy people upstairs murder the new neighbors. The film keeps some of the Gothic aspects of the house, such as the tall and steep roof, but it adds a bit of a twist with pink wood paneling. Pink Palace Apartments is what the sign says, hanging from the house. The overall feeling of this first view of the house does not bring a sense of foreboding, but rather it's almost comical with the man exercising the roof and the VW whizzing by. The film uses the same house in the world of the other mother, but in the other world, the house looks brand new. The other mother's world is one of fantasy and magic, and we can see this from the garden she creates for Coraline. The film and the graphic novel also differ in the way they create the image of the corridor, which connects the real world to the other world. In the graphic novel, the corridor first appears as a black, empty space, which smells like something very old and slow. On Coraline's last trip through the corridor, the walls are described similar in style to the wall made of human body remains in Neil Gaiman's Sandman, Preludes and Nocturne. The wall in Coraline is furry, hot, and wet, and since we do not know what it is made of, it does not look pleasant at all. It almost looks like a womb since Coraline's travel through it towards the light gives it the image of birth. This furry womb sort of symbolism is present in the film, which changes the corridor into a tunnel. The film, however, keeps with the fantasy theme and makes the tunnel glow with color, which is not quite as terrifying as going through a dark corridor. The last time Coraline goes through the tunnel in the film, it no longer glows with color, but instead is filled with cobwebs. Cobwebs do not compare with the warm, wet, and furry walled corridor The film does make up for it, though, by changing the scene so that the door from the other world follows her as she moves through the tunnel. The difference in imagery between the more realistic images in the graphic novel versus the magical style of the film is also evident in the way the characters are drawn. In the graphic novel, the characters are drawn in human or realistic form. Coraline's mother looks human in the way her facial features and hair is drawn. Aside from the button eyes, the other mother is also drawn in human form. Since the film is done in stop-motion animation versus the drawing style done in the graphic novel, the characters in the film do not look as real. This includes the other mother's right hand, which is recreated in a fanciful Edward Scissorhands sort of way compared to the graphic novel, which shows it as a severed human hand.
I'm Wybie. Wybie Lovac.
Wybie?
Short for Wyborn.
The character of Coraline within the graphic novel is different from the film because Coraline does not have a friend. In the film, she has Wybie, her new neighbor, who acts as her companion and support. In the last scene of the film, Wybie saves Coraline from the other mother's hand. While in the graphic novel, she is on her own, a lonely and vulnerable child, which is scary because we know if she gets into trouble, there won't be a Wybie-like character there to save her, since no one knows about the other world. In the book, Coraline cunningly plans a trap for the other mother's right hand by herself, using the key to lure it in by leaving Coraline companionless. Her defeat over the other mother's hand seems more daring and perhaps more victorious in the end. Earlier in the film, her other father also acts as support for her by helping her win the game over the other mother, ultimately sacrificing himself in doing so.
Sorry, Mother, making me. Don't wanna hurt you.
While in the graphic novel, his character is weak and attacks Coraline under the other mother's control. Coraline has to think quickly in order to escape from his grasp, which would mean losing the game and being trapped in the other world. Again, she has no companion to help her here. The other mother's character is evil, of course, in both film and the graphic novel, but that evil side is slower to appear in the film. The graphic novel gives her an evil appearance when we first are introduced to her. The words she says are "lunchtime, Coraline," as if to imply that she's going to eat her. Her messy hair and grin do not look friendly at all. In the film, they keep with this first appearance of the other mother as the evil witch type of Hansel and Gretel.
Mom? What are you doing here in the middle of the night?
You're just in time for supper, dear.
The other mother in the film, however, is prettier than Coraline's real mother, and her first appearance is a lot kinder. As we see, she calls Coraline dear. The change from good to evil, the drastic physical change in the film, as the other mother goes from almost human to spider.
You know I love you.
The graphic novel only changes her character slightly. Keeping the other mother in human form adds the element of fear because she still looks like the same person Coraline trusted earlier in the book. To think that something can be evil, but its level evil does not show in its appearance is scary, versus the film where she is evil, but we can see it, and perhaps also justify her evilness with the fact that she is not really human, but rather a monster. In both the film and the graphic novel, the same moral ending is reached, yet the journey in the graphic novel involves more fear than fantasy. Coraline's character is alone, and at risk of being trapped forever in the other world with no friend there, or in the real world to save her. The film itself is scary, which is why it is rated 8 and over. but there are these elements of vulnerability and true evil in human form that the graphic novel has and the film does not.